The man in the brown suit. It was a quiet morning in downtown San Francisco. The sky was overcast and the streets were just beginning to stir. A man in a simple brown suit walked slowly toward a jewelry store. His hair was neatly combed and his glasses sat perfectly on his nose. He looked like any other customer. No one recognized him. YouTube +3 Precision Tools +3 Creel Creative Design Consultants. 3 As he stepped into the store. The sparkle of diamonds and gold surrounded him. He moved toward a display case, his eyes scanning the elegant pieces. A saleswoman approached, her smile tight and forced. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone cool. "Yes," the man replied softly. "I'm looking for something special. Yahoo +21 YouTube +21 YouTube +21." She looked him up and down, her eyes lingering on his modest suit. "Our pieces are quite expensive," she said. "I understand." He nodded. She hesitated, then turned away. "Perhaps you should try another store." YouTube. The man stood still, his expression unreadable. He looked around the store, then back at the saleswoman. "I see," he said quietly. "Thank you for your time." He turned and walked out, the door closing softly behind him. Outside, he paused, taking a deep breath. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "It's me," he said. "We need to talk." The next day, the jewelry store received a letter. It was from the building's owner. Their lease would not be renewed. YouTube, the saleswoman, read the letter, her hands trembling. She looked up as the man in the brown suit entered the store once more. "You?" she whispered. "Yes," he said. "My name is Sundar Pichai." Her face turned pale. I didn't know." "Perhaps next time you'll treat every customer with respect," he said gently, "regardless of how they look." He turned and walked away, leaving the store silent behind him. But this was just the beginning. Sundar's journey was far from over, to be continued. The hidden room. The news spread quietly at first. Whispers passed between the jewelry store's employees. Nervous glances exchanged in the back office. A notice had gone up in the building lobby, an official statement. Their lease would not be renewed. No reasons listed. Just a final date. Panic moved like a slow fire through the store, but it was the saleswoman, Nisha, who felt it most deeply. The man she had dismissed so casually, so carelessly, had been someone she now saw on television screens and magazine covers. Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google. She hadn't slept that night. The echo of his calm words haunted her. "Perhaps next time, you'll treat every customer with respect." And now, here she was, rearranging displays with shaking hands, uncertain of her future. The other staff didn't speak much to her. They saw what had happened. They knew. But none of them had stepped in either. They had let it happen. And now, they were all paying the price. What no one knew was that Sundar had not returned to punish anyone. He wasn't interested in revenge. He had something else in mind, something deeper, something that had been building inside him for a long time. That evening, Sundar sat alone in a small cafe across the street from the jewelry store, his fingers wrapped around a warm cup of chai untouched. He stared out the window, watching the fading light reflect off the glass storefront. He wasn't thinking about the store anymore. His mind was somewhere else. Years in the past, in a dusty little street in Chennai. He remembered his mother's bangles, cheap but cherished. He remembered how she had once gone into a jewelry shop, her sari old and faded, and how the clerk had ignored her until she left, head bowed. He had seen her cry that night. He had told himself, even as a boy, that if he ever had power, he would never let people like her feel small again. This moment, this store, was not about a grudge. It was a symbol. It was a chance to make something better, not just erase something wrong. As the sun dipped below the skyline, Sundar stood and crossed the street. The store was closing, the staff locking up. But he didn't go to the door. Instead, he turned the corner, walked into the alley beside the building, and entered through a side door only a few people in the city even knew existed. It led into the basement. Old stone walls, half-forgotten corridors, wires running across, the ceiling like veins, and there in a locked room behind an iron door was the beginning of his new plan. The room was empty, dusty, quiet, but it wouldn't be for long. He pulled out a flashlight and a key. This room had been his long before the store upstairs ever opened. He had quietly bought the building years ago, not because of the jewelry shop, but because of the location, and because of what he had planned, to build here someday. He walked slowly across the room, imagining what would soon fill the space. Rows of desks, screens, tools, and most importantly, people. Not executives, not billionaires, but young minds, dreamers, students from neighborhoods, like the one he had grown up in. This place would become a center of learning, a quiet revolution just beneath the surface of a city that often forgot its poor, its outsiders, outside. The lights in the jewelry store finally went dark. Sundar stood in the quiet, his heart beating, slowly but firmly. He had been given everything by the world, and now he would give something back. But before he could begin building the future, he had to face something from his past. He climbed the stairs to the main floor and stepped out, into the night. The street was quiet. A single figure stood near the bus stop, an old man hunched, clutching a worn coat around himself. Sundar paused. Something about the man felt familiar. He crossed the street and approached. As he neared, the man turned. Sundar froze. It was Mr. Venkatraman, his old-school principal. The man who had once changed the course of Sundar's life with a single decision. And now he looked lost, forgotten, like a ghost from another world. "Sir?" Sundar said softly. The old man squinted. Who is it?" "It's me, Sundar Pichai." A long silence passed. Then the old man's eyes widened, not in recognition of the fame, but of the boy he remembered. "You came back," he whispered. "Yes, sir. I came back." The night closed around them, filled with the weight of the past and the promise of something more. But neither of them knew that someone had been watching from the shadows. Someone who didn't want Sundar's plan to succeed. Someone who had their own secret hidden within the walls of that very building. The ghost in the server room, the night was still and quiet, but something about the silence felt wrong. Beneath the surface, like a whisper just beyond hearing, tension stirred. Sundar walked slowly beside Mr. Venkatraman, steadying the old man's trembling steps. He couldn't stop staring at him. It had been decades, yet the man who had once stood tall in front of a crowded classroom now seemed so small, so weathered. The coat he wore had holes in the sleeves. His shoes were cracked and too thin for the cold. Sundar felt an ache in his chest. They sat together on a bench not far from the old jewelry store. It was late, but Sundar didn't care. The air between them held more meaning than the ticking of any clock. "What happened, sir?" Sundar asked softly. The old man looked down at his hands. "I gave everything to my students. Every bit of strength, every year of my life, and when I retired, there was nothing left. No pension, no recognition, just silence." Sundar's jaw tightened. "You once paid for my science books from your own salary. I never forgot that." Mr. Venkatraman gave a faint smile, eyes still distant. "You had a light in you, Sundar. A rare kind. I just helped it stay lit." For a long time, neither of them spoke. Sundar knew what he had to do. This wasn't just about a training center anymore. This was personal. He would not let the people who shaped his life fade into the background of history. The next morning, the basement room under the jewelry store came alive. Contractors arrived early, working under Sundar's private instructions. Old concrete was chipped away, new cables were run, and within days, the bones of a new structure began to rise. He had named it the Foundation, a place for learning, innovation, and most importantly, remembering. He didn't want his name on the walls. Instead, he created a hall where each room would bear the name of a teacher who had changed a life. Not just his life, but thousands of others. He called former classmates, tracked down records, spoke to families. Every story mattered. Every story would be honored, but not everyone shared his vision. On the fourth day of construction, one of the engineers came to him, pale and uneasy. "We found something strange behind the west wall," she said. Sundar followed her to the back of the basement. Dust still hung in the air, but something glinted behind a torn piece of drywall. It was a metal panel, not part of the original building. Plans. He knelt down and examined it, running his fingers over the surface. There was a small keypad on the side, the kind used for digital locks. And beneath that, almost hidden under years of grime, a barely visible symbol, 2 interlocking, rings with a lightning bolt through them. "I've seen this before," Sundar whispered. His mind flashed back to his early days at Google. Deep inside the company's private archives there had been a file, one that wasn't supposed to exist, a secret initiative called Echo Room. The file had been mostly redacted, but he remembered the logo, the rings, the bolt. He turned to the engineer. "No one touches this until I figure out what it is. Understood?" She nodded. That night, long after everyone had gone home, Sundar returned to the basement alone. He stood in front of the hidden panel, staring at it. Something about it unnerved him, not in a technological sense, but emotionally, like it had been waiting for him. He entered a code, not one from the building system, but one he remembered from an old lab manual. 08101973, his mother's birth date. With a soft click, the panel opened. Behind it was a narrow door leading to a room that had not seen light in years. The smell of dust and metal hit him immediately. Inside, rows of old servers blinked faintly as if powered by some long-forgotten energy source. The hum was low, constant, and unsettling. On a desk in the corner was a monitor. He brushed off the dust and powered it on. The screen flickered to life, green code on black. "Welcome back, Spiwa," he froze. Spiwa, his initials. But this system predated everything. It shouldn't know his name, his credentials, yet here it was. A line of text appeared. "Do you want to see what they hid from you?" Sundar's breath caught. He typed slowly. "Yes." The screen shifted. Video files loaded one after another. Recordings from meetings, conversations, test labs. All related to Echo Room. A project meant to map human decision-making through biometric data, but not just observe, manipulate. One file opened on its own. A room full of people. Faces covered. One of them stood at a console speaking clearly. "We have the data set from the prototype now. Once it's tested in a real-world environment, we can begin deployment. Phase 1, social shaping. Phase 2, emotional conditioning." Sundar stared in disbelief. Another voice entered. Familiar, cold, and distant. "We'll test it in limited urban markets. Education systems make ideal test grounds. They don't fight back." He realized what he was hearing. This project, buried and forgotten, had used public systems, maybe even schools, as quiet laboratories. Possibly without anyone's consent. His stomach turned. His heart pounded. What if his old school had been part of it? What if Mr. Venkatraman had known? A message blinked onto the screen. "Do you still want to build your foundation?" He stared at it, unsure what to answer, because if you do, the past will come for you. The silence beneath the floor. The room felt colder now. Sundar stood still, the low hum of the server racks filling the space like a heartbeat trapped in the walls. Behind him, the secret door remained open, casting a sliver of pale light into the darkness. In front of him, the monitor blinked, its last message frozen on the screen like a quiet threat. "Do you still want to build your foundation? Because if you do, the past will come for you." He didn't respond. Not right away. His hands hung at his sides, fingers slightly trembling, though the air wasn't cold enough for that. It was something deeper, something in his chest, an old weight he hadn't felt since his early days, walking alone through the corridors of institutions where people looked at him and saw nothing special. He had built a life on clarity and logic, but this was murky, This was shadowed. He looked at the servers again. Who had kept them powered all these years? Who had been maintaining them, if anyone? And why had they chosen now to speak? When he left the basement that night, he didn't go straight home. He walked for hours. Through the hills of San Francisco, past the quiet hum of streetcars and glowing windows. The city was asleep, but he wasn't. His thoughts spun in widening circles. By morning, he made a decision. He would continue. Not in defiance of the threat, but because of it. Because if systems of manipulation had once hidden beneath classrooms, buried in the very places meant to uplift people, then he had a responsibility to bring light to those shadows. And if someone was still watching, still pulling strings, they would have to face him in the open. But he couldn't do it alone. 2 days later, in a quiet corner of Silicon Valley, Sundar met with Maya Reddy, a former cybersecurity engineer from Alphabet. She had left the company years ago after a disagreement over internal ethics protocols. She now ran a small nonprofit that provided digital security tools for educators in low-income regions. Maya listened carefully as Sundar told her everything, about the hidden room, the servers, the files, the message. Her face never changed. She just sat with her elbows on the table and her eyes steady. "You're not imagining it," she said finally. "Echo Room wasn't just theory, it was real. I saw traces of it in old source code. It was buried deep, well beyond anything public." "Why, didn't you say anything back then?" Sundar asked. "I did," she said, her voice low. "But no one wanted to listen. I was warned to walk away, and I did." He nodded slowly. "But now you're here," she added, leaning forward. "Which means it's still active. Someone kept it alive." Together, they began to unravel the files. The servers contained more than just video evidence. There were logs, biometric scans, behavior pattern data harvested from unknown sources. And worst of all, lists of names, schools, districts, student IDs. One of the oldest logs carried a name that hit Sundar like a fist, Venkatraman Institute of Science and Culture, Chennai, his old school. He stared at the screen, unable to breathe. If this was true, if that school had been one of the earliest test environments, then everyone he had grown up with, his classmates, his teachers, even himself, had been part of something without ever knowing. Maya pointed to a code tag on the corner of the log. "See that marker?" she said. "That's a trigger flag. It means the system was designed to stimulate emotional reactions and then record the outcome. They were monitoring choices, how people responded under pressure, stress, fear. It wasn't just data gathering, it was behavioral engineering." The implications spun through Sundar's mind. This wasn't just unethical, it was dangerous. If refined, if perfected, this system could predict and shape decisions on a massive scale. Elections, education, social behavior, and worst of all, it could do so invisibly. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "This is why they didn't want me to dig here," he whispered. "Not because of who I am, but because of what this place remembers." Maya looked at him, her voice suddenly softer. "We can expose it, Sundar, but if we do, people will come after you. This isn't just corporate secrets anymore. This is decades of buried guilt, and someone will do anything to keep it that way." He didn't hesitate. "Let them." The next day, Sundar returned to his foundation site. The construction was ahead of schedule. Walls had gone up. Wiring was nearly finished. It looked ordinary from the outside, but deep below, hidden in the bones of the earth, the servers still pulsed. He brought in his own team, people he trusted, quiet experts. He had the entire basement scanned, isolated, protected. He ordered a secure container built around the server room, not to hide it, but to preserve it. It would become an archive, a truth vault. He wasn't going to destroy the evidence. He was going to display it, let the world decide. But even as the building rose, the shadows moved. One evening, as he was reviewing floor plans alone, a message appeared on his tablet. "No sender, no traceable origin. We told you to stop." He looked around the empty room. His heart beat faster. He tapped the screen, trying to trace the code. Nothing. The file deleted itself as he watched. Seconds later, a call came through. "Unknown number," he answered. Silence. Then, a voice. Modulated. Unrecognizable. "Your school was only the beginning. You don't know what you're walking into." Click. He sat there in the dark, the tablet still glowing in his hand. He had always believed in technology, in its power to connect, to build, to improve lives. But now he was confronting its other face, the one born in hidden labs, trained in secrecy and left behind to rot or evolve in silence. He knew now that this wasn't just a story of redemption. It was a war for truth. And in that war, the next move would not be his, it would be theirs. The Whisper Protocol. The rain had started just after midnight, a slow, steady rhythm that washed over the city like a lullaby for the sleepless. Sundar stood by the window of his temporary apartment overlooking the Foundation's construction site. From this height, the building looked peaceful, almost innocent. Lights flickered in soft yellow tones, illuminating the skeletal frame of what would soon be classrooms and labs. But beneath the surface, beneath the floors he had so carefully designed, something much older waited, something that had refused to be forgotten. He hadn't told anyone about the call, not Maya, not his team, not even Mr. Venkatraman. The voice on the phone had been like a blade without weight, silent, sharp, deadly. The threat was not loud. It didn't need to be. It had spoken of beginnings, of scale, of systems so vast that they had touched his life before he ever realized there was something to fear. His sleep that night was thin and broken. Dreams came in fragments, flashes of a classroom, a teacher erasing a chalkboard, whispers in the hallway, a glowing screen behind a locked door. He woke with a jolt just before sunrise, drenched in sweat, breath heavy in his chest. When he arrived at the site that morning, his security chief was waiting. "You need to see this," she said, her voice tight. They went downstairs, not to the server room but to the main hall under construction. A massive pane of glass scheduled to be installed that day had been shattered. Not by accident. Carefully. Deliberately. On the floor where the glass had once stood, someone had carved a single word into the concrete with what looked like a drill or a sharp blade. "Stop." Sundar stared at the word for a long time. There were no cameras in that hallway yet. No motion sensors. Just silence and evidence. The warning had become physical. Maya arrived an hour later. She walked around the damage with slow, deliberate steps. "They're trying to make you pause," she said. "Not to scare you away, not really. They know you won't back down. But if they can get you to slow just enough, maybe someone else finishes the job before you can." "The job?" Sundar asked. "The job of rewriting the past," she said. Later that day, they returned to the server room. Maya had brought in someone new, Ravi, a data archaeologist, one of the best in the world. He specialized in salvaging corrupted systems from old tech and restoring lost code. Quiet, thoughtful, and deeply curious, Ravi got to work without asking many questions. Within hours, he had cracked open a deeper layer in the archive. Files even Maya hadn't seen. What they found changed everything. The project hadn't been limited to India or the United States. The same protocol, same interface had been quietly implemented in over 20 countries. The system had used educational apps, government-funded school software, even online test platforms to capture emotional response patterns from students. And then, here was the twist, it had cross-referenced that data with behavior in later life. Voting records, purchasing habits, job applications. It wasn't just measuring children. It was trying to predict the adults they would become. "This isn't just wrong," Maya whispered. It's a blueprint for control. They traced the software back to a hidden shell company, Arcadia Research, defunct for over a decade. Yet recent updates on the server log showed activity. Someone was still feeding the system. "I want to know who," Sundar said. "Then we follow the money." Maya replied. The next week passed in a blur. While construction continued on the upper levels of the foundation, Sundar, Maya, and Ravi worked deep underground, piecing together names, addresses, server locations, and financial records. A pattern began to emerge. Arcadia had been bought, in pieces, its patents scattered across several holding firms. But one name showed up in almost every transaction. Dylan Tate. Sundar knew that name. Dylan had once been a senior executive at Alphabet's Experimental Technologies division, charismatic, brilliant, and unafraid to challenge the ethics board when it got in his way. Sundar hadn't seen him in years. Rumor was, he had vanished after a failed neural computing trial and moved into private research. But now, it seemed, he had never stopped working, only gone deeper underground. He's trying to rebuild Echo Room, Maya said. Or worse, he already has. Sundar sat alone that night, staring at the ceiling of the basement. Memories came back, not just of teachers and classrooms, but of moments that had shaped him. A hesitation during an exam, a sudden rush of confidence during a speech. Had those moments really been his? Or had someone nudged him? He didn't want to believe it. But what if? Ravi entered quietly and handed him a file. This was deep in the logs, he said. It's personal. Sundar opened it. The file contained biometric entries tagged with his name, his reactions during his school years, stress patterns, even audio, transcripts of emotional spikes, all categorized, all stored. They had me mapped, Sundar said. Not just you, Ravi added. They mapped every child in that school. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the old machines. Then Sundar stood. Not shaken, not afraid. We bring it all into the light. Maya and Ravi looked at him. We make it public? She asked. Not just public, he said. We make it part of the foundation. A living museum. Not to shame, not to accuse, but to show what happens when power forgets empathy. We let the next generation learn the truth. They'll come for you, Maya warned. They already are, Sundar said. Just then a loud crash echoed from above. The lights flickered. A smell, smoke, began to filter down from the stairwell. Ravi ran to the door, the main floor. Someone set a fire. Sundar's voice was calm. Get everyone out. What about you? Maya shouted. I'll get the server. It's too dangerous. He didn't answer. As flames licked the ceiling above, Sundar ran toward the vault, heart pounding, knowing the choice he made now would not just define his future, but rewrite the story of his past. The fire that remembered, the flames moved like memory, unpredictable, hungry, alive. They leapt across beams, danced along unfinished walls, and poured smoke into the stairwell like ghosts rising from the forgotten. Above ground, panic erupted. Construction workers, engineers, assistants, all fled through the emergency exits, coughing, calling out names. Alarms screamed through the building as if warning not just of fire but of something deeper finally surfacing. Below them, Sundar Pichai ran. The server room was down 2 levels, sealed behind reinforced glass and concrete, but the smoke was finding its way in, worming through the vents like a warning. The foundation was supposed to stand as a symbol of hope, truth, resilience. But now it stood on the edge of destruction, threatened before it ever had the chance to live. His footsteps echoed in the stone corridor, the red emergency lights flickering against the walls like heartbeat pulses. He reached the vault door and entered the code. For a moment, the lock didn't respond. Then, with a soft click, the mechanism opened. He pushed the door and stepped inside. The room was still intact. The servers blinked, untouched by the fire. But the air was tightening, smoke pressing in from above. He didn't have long. He crossed the floor quickly, reached for the external drive he had hidden days earlier. His hand hovered over the terminal. One button, one final transfer. He pressed it. The drive began to glow, pulling the archive into itself. Files and footage, logs and names, truth being condensed into something real, something portable. The machine hummed louder, faster. Heat rippled in waves. Just then, the screen lit up. A message. You can still stop this. He stared at it. The same voice, the same presence. We will bury it again. He typed with shaking fingers. No. You won't. Another message. You are risking everything, he paused, then replied. It's not mine to keep. The screen went black. Transfer complete. He yanked the drive free and stuffed it into his coat, just as a loud crack split the ceiling. Smoke poured in, thick and angry. Flames had found the upper wall. Sparks rained down like fireflies. He turned and ran, coughing, eyes burning. When he emerged into the stairwell, the heat hit him like a wall. Wood and drywall cracked above. Somewhere, pipes burst, spraying steam into the smoke. He climbed with blind steps, arm over his face. The exit was close, so close. A hand reached out through the haze. This way. Maya's voice fierce, alive. She grabbed his arm and pulled him through a side door. They burst out into the alley, into clean air. Sundar dropped to his knees, coughing, gasping, his hand still clutching the drive. Ravi rushed over with a blanket. Fire crews screamed past them toward the entrance. Hoses roared to life. The building behind them glowed orange, smoke pouring, into the night sky like a signal flare for the truth finally free. No lives were lost. By some miracle, the fire had spared the main floors. But the message had been sent. Someone had tried to stop him. But he had survived. 3 weeks later, the Yao Foundation reopened. It didn't make headlines the way scandals did. There were no cameras, no red ribbons, no influencers. But word spread quietly, through forums, schools, community halls. And slowly, people came. Inside the building, past the tech labs and classrooms, one corridor led down into the heart of the structure. There, in a long glass hallway, was what Sundar called the room of remembering. Walls lined with documents, digital exhibits, evidence, not of blame but of learning. This was where Echo Room ended, and where the truth began. 1. Installation let visitors scroll through redacted files, learning how systems had once tried to shape minds. Another showed the biometric spikes of children, fear, curiosity, joy, reduced to data points, now given meaning again. And one wall, at the end, bore the names of every teacher, every student, who had unknowingly participated. Dervenkatraman's name was carved there in gold. Sundar stood in that room one evening alone after the visitors had gone. The lights dimmed. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was full. Full of what had been carried, fought for, and finally released. Maya entered quietly and stood beside him. You did it, she said. No, he replied. We did. She nodded. And what? Now he looked around, eyes calm. Now we protect this, we teach, we listen, we stay humble. And if they ever try to build something like this again... He turned to her. We'll already be watching. Outside, a group of students from a local school arrived for a late tour. They laughed as they entered, unaware of the battle that had made this place possible. They didn't need to know everything, they just needed to walk forward, knowing that someone had once stood in fire to clear the path. The foundation stood tall, not just a building, a promise.